Extra time.
Hello and welcome back to the Extra Time podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick Van Straaten, and today I'm joined by Chris Hamill. How are you, Chris?
I'm very good, thank you. Yes, only a couple days before I'm off for a couple weeks. So I'm trying my best not to enter holiday mode. Hopefully that doesn't shine through on this glorious podcast.
You're looking very clean shaven at the moment. It looks like you're very streamlined so that you can go fast. Is that what's happening right now?
I was very hungover Monday morning, and if you watched Winners and Losers, you'd be able to tell I looked extremely bedraggled, mate. So I thought I'd make a little bit of effort for the next thing that I appeared on. When I was watching it through, I was like, "Fucking hell, Chris, get a grip, man, get a grip." So this is me making a bit more effort, yeah.
Well, it's been a tough 2 years on all of us. I feel like
I've aged horribly, mate. Grey's coming through left, right, and centre.
I went to the gym, managed to squeeze a gym session in for like the first time in ages.
Nice.
And as I was sitting there on the bench, I was just like, look at those bags under my eyes, man. Like I could not believe it. But yeah, I mean,
I sent my girlfriend a picture of me the other day. I just woke up from a nap and I sent her my face because it was like a really sleepy face. I look really lost, bemused. And her reply was, "Look at your eye bags." And that is not the reason I sent it to her. So I completely empathise, mate. I know. Like piss I was in the snow, my eyes. But yeah.
Well, should we get on to our topic for today? Maybe that will reinvigorate us because we're going to talk about Arsenal's attack. It's one of the biggest stories right now. It's been one of the biggest stories since the beginning of the year. What Arsenal are going to do in the striker market come the summer. Obviously, we talked about this earlier, but we were talking about Dusan Vlahovic, and for very obvious reasons, he will not be appearing on this particular episode of the podcast. But there are a ton of names that have been linked here. Alexander Isak, Jonathan David, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, rumours that he might have agreed a deal with Arsenal. But in the last 24 hours, rumours of a player out of PSV Eindhoven, who we will talk about later, and a striker out of the Portuguese league as well. So we thought today we'd take a look at some of those options. But first, maybe let's just go over the state of the Arsenal attack, because it's the best it's been for a while, but it's still a little bit of a mixed bag, I would say. So Arsenal have done really well to pump up their shots this season. Last couple of years, under Arteta, the shots had got really, really low. They were kind of in the 11, 12 a game range. It was really, really poor stuff. But now 15.3 shots per game this season. That's 8th in Europe's top 5 leagues. So they are finally getting some volume. And that's really, really heartening for Gunners fans to see, because always the hallmark of a Wenger attack was a ton of shots and good quality shots. That hasn't quite followed along. They're only at 5.1 shots on target per 90. To put that in context, that's 20th in Europe. So it's starting to come down. When you look at expected goals per 90, it's 1.5 a game. That's 23rd in Europe. And when you look at actual goals, they're 32nd in Europe, okay? Out of 98 teams overall. So 31 of the other 97 sides have outscored them. So there's clearly room for improvement here.
And we probably should have expected that to an extent, right? With the attacking players getting younger and, being a little bit more exuberant with their efforts from distance, let's say.
Yeah, and I mean, Xhaka and Partey, lots of shots from range. So you expect that to come down a bit. Of course, as well, I'm sure Arsenal fans will be saying, well, we actually weren't great up until kind of the beginning of December, and it was then that the press came in. It was then Martinelli became a regular starter. Aubameyang was benched. And so actually the attack may be slightly better than the stats across the whole season look, though you could equally say that with the exception of a couple of games, Arsenal's run since early December has been quite favourable. So it's quite hard to put it together. So I would argue that we should look at the numbers for the whole of the season. But also when you look at the depth, those young players are playing a lot of minutes right now. And they kind of have to, because when you look at the depth on the bench, it's Pepe, it's Smith Rowe right now, and it's Nketiah. Now, I like all three of those players. I think they've got things going for them, but that is not Champions League quality depth. It certainly isn't title quality depth. You look at Chelsea. Chelsea's attack has struggled at times this season, but their attacking options are Timo Werner, Hakim Ziyech, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Lukaku, Havertz, Pulisic, Mount. Like, that is an enormous array of attacking talents, and that's leaving out of account the way that people like Reece James contribute to the attack. So Arsenal need numbers and quality, especially with Lacazette and Nketiah out of contract this summer. Both could be offered new deals. Balogun might come back, but I don't know. Like, one way or another, Arsenal need to be planning for the next phase of the attack. And the next phase of attack, to me, Chris, is basically the same thing, but with a better centre forward, or a younger centre forward, certainly. Yeah, sure. And probably a little bit more depth as well. So what do you think about Arsenal's attack right now? And do you agree with me about where it could be improved? And what do you think about Lacazette's performance this season? Because I think Arsenal fans are still a little bit kind of grudging about giving him any respect on what has actually turned into a very good season for him.
Yeah, I think that would be really disrespectful and incongruous to the effort he has put in. I mean, the goals aren't there. Only 1 goal away from home, right? And 4 in the league in total, I think, at the time of recording. But he's undeniably been very good. That's his all-round game, not necessarily his potency in front of goal. His expected goals and expected assists per 90 up to 0.5, so contributing every other game. Leads the club 4 assists with 7, averaging 2.5 shots per game, which is not massive, but it's okay for a striker in a more reserved role, I guess. And yeah, like we said, his creativity has been on point. So if we're gonna replace him like for like to keep this Arsenal front 4 ticking, let's say, because he is an enabler, isn't he? He gets the best out of the wingers that flank him, and potentially that number 10, whoever it is sitting in that hole, whether that be Odegaard, Smith Rowe, etc. So to replace him, you need a physical presence. He's putting up 18 pressures per game, which is the second best in the squad. You need the occasional moment of genius. He has got the ability to jink past his man or put a ball through the lines, hasn't he? Rarely dispossessed, so very economic on the ball. So not a really, really easy profile to replace. And Arsenal, some of the targets you've sounded out, not necessarily the same profile either, which is what I found interesting about, the likes of Gakpo and Nunez, for example, not the same profile of striker. But yeah, we can chat about Nunez if you want first, because he is the one that's got everyone excited at current. Yes. But I still have my reservations despite an excellent season.
Yeah, I mean, Arsenal are kind of inevitably having to cast the net wider, right? Alexander Isak, they're talking about 80 million euros for him. He's not had a strong season, even though he's clearly talented. That seems like a lot of money to spend on a guy who is a little bit of a gamble. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, fantastic player. A fully fit Calvert-Lewin would be an amazing signing for Arsenal, but doesn't have necessarily the creativity, the silkiness on the ball that Lacazette has. And of course, his injury record this season has been just absolutely shocking. And then Jonathan David, question marks over his physical capability at the moment. Obviously, he's very quick. He's pretty creative. He's played in a second striker role, which seems like it would translate well to the Lacazette position. But can he hold the ball up in the way Arsenal need him to? Because you look at Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, even if you throw in Smith Rowe there's not a lot of physical presence. It's quite a lightweight front line. So it would be nice here to have somebody who is able to stand up to Premier League centre-backs. I remember when Timo Werner came to Chelsea, he said, I think he played against Brighton in his first game, and he said, I'd never seen 3 centre-backs that big
Land
before.
Of the Giants, yeah.
And this is a guy who's still, one of the fastest players in the league, but he was just like, I had no idea what I was kind of coming into. And so it's kind of telling that Nunez and Gakpo, who we're going to talk about today, both about 6'2", physical specimens, because Lacazette deceptively strong. And I think that is something they're going to want to target. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about Nunez, who he is, what he might bring to the side, but also about your reservations, because I think that there are plenty to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for those who don't know, he turns 23 this summer. He's obviously had a very good season for Benfica. Only his second campaign in Portugal, though, following up 15 goal involvements last season and around 1,800 minutes with 22 this season at the time of writing. So has been producing a really consistent rate. Last season was playing as part of playing in a 2 or occasionally a 3, and Seferovic was, of course, their their really prolific striker last campaign, but Nunez has taken over that role as the demonic presence inside the box this season. I think he's only scored 1 goal from outside the box, just to give you an indication of where he does most of his good work. Has also performed in European competitions too. 4 and 4 UCL starts this season. 6 in 5 in last season's edition of the Europa League. If we're talking, if we want a shot monster, just to mix things up at Arsenal, he's putting up 3.7 a game for Benfica, although Benfica obviously a very possession-dominant side in the Liga NOS, the Premier League. I think they're second behind Porto, still averaging around 60-62%. So he sees a lot of opportunity to run up those numbers. 1.9 dribbles. A lot of that is he has this physicality about him. He is a strong runner. He's not the most aesthetically pleasing to watch, and a lot of his goals have been almost bundled over the line, and a lot of his dribbles are him just knocking people out of the way. But you'd rather him have those raw capabilities in many ways than being super silky on the ball, because like you just illustrated there with the Timo Werner anecdote, it's harder to adapt physically maybe than technically to the Premier League sometimes as a forward. 1.5 key passes, so is very capable of laying on chances for his teammates as well. Very, very good with his head. He would lap up those Tierney and Saka crosses. And Arsenal don't have or haven't had that direct focal point for a long time. But that doesn't mean that he's going to be good at holding the ball up. And only 13 passes completed per 90 for a side that see all that possession is a little bit worrying if we're looking to replace Lacazette like for like. Lacazette, not the best passer by any means, but much better than Nunez, who's still a little bit cumbersome in build-up. He looks very raw when he's asked to be part of those intricate moves in and around the box. But explosive, strong. Maybe you get in there before he has another season like this and you end up paying £80 million, as was quoted for Vlahovic, as was quoted for Osimhen, and you just develop him for a year, Van Straaten. I don't think he comes into the side and makes a massive difference straight away. Maybe a good physical outlet to bring in off the bench with Lacazette signed on for another year. That might be a good little combination. That might be a good halfway house. But yeah, I think if you have to pay 80 mil for him, euros that is, as has been reported, I think you might be getting lured into an overpay.
Yeah, I mean, what you'd probably want to do here is some sort of deal with add-ons, right? I mean, it feels like a lot of money, and to be honest, they do extract big fees in the Portuguese league. They're very, very good at it because that's the survival of the league depends on it. I mean, I hear what you're saying with passing, though I think sometimes we perhaps put too much emphasis on pass numbers for forwards.
His progressive pass is quite low as well, but he does play he is on the shoulder, isn't he? He is the one receiving progressive passes, and he does it very well.
Yeah, and I mean, his creativity is still okay, right? He's still at 1.4 key passes a game, so it looks like there's some vision in there. But Lacazette in the top 16% of strikers for creativity, in the top 12% of strikers for passes into the penalty area. Like that, there's an indication there that Lacazette is unusually good on the ball. And I think you can see that when he gets it. He's always been really technically proficient. Playing in front of a line of Saka, Smith Rowe, and Odegaard, you can kind of see more of an argument for Nunez. Asking him to dovetail with Martinelli may be a little bit more of a complicated proposition, right? If you want that off-ball runner, who's it going to be there? That's a little bit difficult.
Yeah, because he does come in a lot off the left. If you watch him a little bit more closely in the league, and obviously that is the space that Martinelli operates in. So unless they sort of establish a quick understanding of when to swap in and out, they might be stepping on each other's toes a little bit. I think you're right in that sense. Yeah,
though of course, both being able to speak Portuguese, like that might help them settle a little bit. Like there may be ways to kind of smooth that transition there. But yeah, I mean, if you can have him and Martinelli swapping position, then you could actually see a path to it really, really working out. But it just feels like Arsenal have struggled in attack under Arteta for so long, and finally they found a working formula. You want to really handle it delicately, because you don't want to tease apart that really fragile chemistry that they've managed to create. However, when it comes to settling, he is big, he is strong, he is fast. His numbers are so good that even if they took a bit of a dip, they'd still be pretty useful. And actually, transplants from the Primera Liga have gone quite well lately. I mean, obviously there are some we don't talk about. So we tend to talk about Bruno Fernandes more than we tend to talk about Alex Telles. But there's a guy called Toney who is a football analyst, who basically looked at the idea of, the quote unquote like Bundesliga tax. He looked at the ways that imports from different leagues tend to adapt to the Premier League and the dip in their performance. And it seems like basically every league does suffer a bit of a dip in performance. And actually he had players coming in from the Primera Liga retaining more of their production than players coming in from the Bundesliga. And certainly if we were talking here about Arsenal going and signing Nkunku, we would probably say, oh, well, that feels like a slam dunk. That feels like a really safe transfer. Luis Diaz obviously has come into Liverpool and seems to be performing well. Well, he was at 0.94 expected goals and assists per 90 before he left the Primera Liga back in January. Nunez is currently at 1.1. So these numbers are what you'd want to see from a guy playing in a weaker league, right? They are actually off the charts. And with some other players, you kind of think, no, if you're coming to us from a weaker division, I want to see like world-ending numbers. I want to see numbers like you've just truly dominated that division.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I like this one. If he
had the season he's having twice, I'd be a bit more bullish and maybe could overlook the price. But his like expected goals have leapt up so significantly from last season to this season, despite him being a bit of an assist merchant last campaign, that it could also... There's also just not that pedigree there to justify paying what Juventus paid for Vlahovic, who is profiles pretty similarly, but is a lot more refined, at least on the eye.
Though Nunez does seem to be quicker, right, than Vlahovic. And also Vlahovic, his numbers at least aren't boosted by penalties in the way that Vlahovic is well. Like Vlahovic was on a real hot streak, has gone into Juventus and continued on that massive hot streak. But I'd still think that's going to come back down to earth a little bit. Like he's going to be a very good player for them, but I don't think he's as good as he currently looks.
Yeah, 3 penalties I think it is for Nunez this season. So not insignificant, but not a worryingly high amount. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice to see the way that in the Europa League, in the Champions League, where their ability to dominate possession has not been as pronounced, he is still putting up really good underlying numbers. He's still taking, over 3 shots a game. He's still putting up the same number of key passes. He's actually completing more dribbles, which, to be honest, we see quite often. And his defensive actions are pretty solid. So there's definitely enough here to be intrigued by. For sure. If Arsenal went and signed him, I wouldn't particularly have an issue with it. And I don't think it even matters if they spend quite a lot of money, because they've got relatively little surgery to do this summer. They probably need a new backup right back. They need a new central midfielder and they need a striker. And that's broadly it. Obviously, like I say, they could do with some more depth in attack, but getting it, if they go and spend all their budget on a striker signing, we would look at that and say that's kind of reasonable, right?
I guess I don't want to overly poo-poo the idea of Arsenal signing him. It was mainly the price that I took umbrage with. Him being in the same ballpark as Vlahovic, as Osimhen, more expensive than Calvert-Lewin, probably more expensive than Roma would quote you for Tammy Abraham at 80, or maybe around the same ballpark. And him having only really killed it for a season in the Liga NOS, which plenty of players have done. I just have, reservations, I think is the fairest way to phrase it.
Yeah.
But Arsenal maybe have to take the gamble before another club do, with a distinct lack of great number 9s out there at current, or at least great young number 9s, or people that are ready to contribute straight away even.
Yeah. I mean, of all those guys you've talked about there, like Osimhen is by far the standout player, right?
Yeah.
But he obviously has had his injury issues as well. It really comes down to the difference. I suppose if we're talking about 80 million for Darwin Nunez, if it actually ended up being that, and then supposedly Napoli are quoting 100 million for Osimhen, then you think, ugh, that's I don't know. Like I don't want to spend that much on a striker, but you're better spending a ton of money and getting value than you are spending a ton of money on a gamble.
Yeah, especially if you get decent money for one-to-way players like Pepe. I would just use that to bridge the gap, right? And rationalize it that way. Like, for me, Nunez, I think he has the potential to be quite Diego Costa-y and give you a bit of...
I see that.
You know, you could use a bully up front, couldn't you, to complement the talent around it? But like you've said, does that front four work because of Lacazette's qualities, which we are moving away from with Nunez and also paying a lot of money for? Oh, I'm just a little bit uneasy. But he could make you look really stupid.
Yeah, though I would argue that Nunez is much more in the mold of Lacazette than Vlahovic would have been, and certainly than, say, Calvert-Lewin would be. Like, he does look like he's more of a...
He's a runner. Yeah, for sure. He's
but he's also got the technical ability, right? Like, we've never seen Calvert-Lewin put up creative numbers, for example, or Vlahovic, really. You'd have more faith in them as goal scorers in an Arsenal side. But it really comes down to whether Arteta is looking for the technical ability first and for a guy who looks like he could turn into this all-round centre-forward, or whether you're looking for a guy who's just going to absolutely slap goals in which case there's an argument for a different sort of centre-forward. Like, for instance, you could understand the links to Armando Broja, who at Southampton, who does look like much more of a run-and-gun kind of striker.
I think I'd be intrigued as to whether, I mean, he got 9 assists the season before, I guess, so there is a history of being a good creator. It's just when I have watched him, he hasn't given me that creatory vibe. And obviously, like we've said, Benfica are very possession heavy. They have had like the likes of Pizzi, Seferovic, I don't know, even Grimaldo this season. Like the seasons at Benfica where 3 or 4 guys get 10 plus goals. And you wonder if that form is transplantable. That might be an unfair criticism to level at him.
It's fair.
But I see some similarities with Broja. If he could just be as creative in the Premier League, that would be really, really impressive. But I mean, do you take Broja? I say Chelsea are willing to deal, which would be weird. Do you take Broja at 40, you know, around that price and hedge your bets even more on someone just coming very, very good over the space of one campaign?
I would say probably not, just because I think that somebody better will be available for like not that much of a different price, or somebody more somebody safer. Okay. So for instance, I think you could probably get Jonathan David for about that price. Broja's numbers are not sensational. They're good. They're definitely good, and I like the player, but he's neither a perfect stylistic fit, nor are his numbers so insane that you don't care about him being a stylistic fit. So I think if Everton get relegated, how much am I going to have to spend for Calvert-Lewin or even Richarlison? How much would I have to spend for Jonathan David? Is there somebody else I can get who's maybe a little bit more of an offbeat choice because their contract's running down or something, you know? I'd just be tempted in that situation to have a look around Europe.
Yeah, sure.
And think, if we can get Nkunku out of Leipzig for like 60, 70 million euros, is that not more sensible? And you can rely on him and Martinelli. One of them will become a centre forward. I don't know.
Yeah, greater depth out wide as well. If Martinelli all of a sudden becomes a sensational forward,
yeah, exactly. So there are some really. It's actually quite a complicated situation.
Yeah,
that Arteta's got to look at and figure out what his best strategy is, because it's really going to come down to what's available in the market, who's getting better offers, probably what happens as well once Haaland's destination is decided, because then you could imagine a ton of clubs suddenly saying we need a striker, and money is flying around Europe at anybody who's ever scored a goal.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, in terms of profile, I see Jonathan David as the most similar to Lacazette.
Sure. Yeah.
And like when I've seen West Ham linked with Nunez in the past, I thought this is exactly the sort of transfer they should go for. I don't know if like he's somewhere. I feel like he's somewhere in between that grey area of a pushing West Ham onwards to Europa League football, to taking Arsenal convincingly back into the Champions League spots. I mean, a lot of Arsenal's progression, I guess, or next season will hinge on getting this transfer right. So, yeah, none of these feel like a safe bet at the price that's been banded about, but interesting ones nonetheless.
Yeah, I suppose now I'm thinking about it. I guess I think, do you want Nunez at 80 million euros if you could get, say, Ivan Toney for 35 million pounds?
Yeah, even I don't know. Still a bit of a head.
Yeah, but that's like, if that's like your kind of bottom level of what you can get a Premier League quality striker for, then you think, okay, maybe that should be our yardstick. But should we move on? Should we move on to Gakpo, Cody Gakpo, the Dutch attacker who's lighting things up for PSV Eindhoven this season? Obviously, PSV, if you haven't been paying attention to the Eredivisie, they've been pretty much in lockstep with Ajax all season long, which is no joke whatsoever. Really flying under Roger Schmidt's got some really interesting players there. You know, obviously Goetze, Boscagli, Gakpo, Songare, Madueke, like a ton of interesting players at PSV.
4 years later, we're still talking about him.
And he's still sick. So Gakpo, obviously, we like anybody who has the word Gak in their name. But and to be honest, he plays like he's on Gak. He plays off the left, but can feature as a centre forward. And like Nunez, he's a bit of a physical specimen. He's 6'2". And he weighs 76 kilos. So he's about 3 kilos heavier than Lacazette and several inches taller. So from that point of view, if that were how, strength on the field works, then Gakpo does seem to have the minerals to turn into a physical player. Like Nunez, he's closing in on his 23rd birthday, but he's got 4 seasons in the Eredivisie. So a weaker league, but a larger sample size. Yeah. Now, this season, as I say, because he's largely played off the left, he profiles as much more of a creator. 8 goals and 13 assists in 1,500 minutes, though. That is absolutely unbelievable. And his numbers right now, this is what I was saying before about you want to see people dominating smaller divisions. 3.7 shots per game, 3.6 key passes, though he does take some set pieces, 3.6 dribbles. So this is a guy who is just excelling in pretty much every regard, playing in a high-octane pressing system, technically good age, because I think Arsenal kind of want to look for players in this 22-23 range at the moment because they're young enough to develop with this side, but old enough that they're not going to get completely blown off the ball. These aren't 17-year-olds. These are people who've been playing senior football for a while. I really like Cody Gakpo, Chris, but this one does require a little bit more imagination, doesn't it?
Yeah, this one, to me, would signal that they have kind of, Arteta and Edu, are maybe not convinced by a number of the number 9 targets we spoke about prior, perhaps because of the price. And they are seriously considering turning Martinelli into a striker and having Gakpo on the left-hand side and Pepe as cover on both flanks, as well as your boy Smith Rowe. What I like about Gakpo is, unlike Nunez, there is a very clear sort of progression in his numbers. He is making a difference in every European competition he's featuring in, whether that be the Europa League or the Conference League. Watched him play for the Netherlands. I think he scored his first goal in September of 2021, and it was an absolute stunner. Yeah. So he's ticking the right boxes, and like you said, like he's put up over 1,400 minutes in 1920. It was near enough 1,700 last season. So he's getting a good amount of minutes. So I trust the data a little bit more, which again you've already sounded out. I mean, Arsenal moved for him in January, didn't they? So it feels like a guy they're very confident in moving for, even though his price is around 40 million euros, which isn't insignificant. I'm not totally sure, just because it feels like Martinelli would have to play for the middle for this to make sense. Like, enlighten me if you feel otherwise, because I know he's played centre forward on occasion. I think it's 3 appearances this season at centre forward. But you want your dribbly, creative guys in those wider positions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you would see his dribbling ability drop a little bit in central areas, right? But if you get a guy in who's a great dribbler and you put him in a congested area of the field, then you'd expect him to still be able to beat the odd man, and that's got a real value there.
I guess where before I forget, I guess where I'm a little bit skeptical is this feels like a similar evolution to Donyell Malen, who was, of course, at PSV. Yeah, you know, in terms of... Actually, Marlon's a little bit ahead of him because Marlon was moved into the centre by Roger Schmidt and was very, very effective there, wasn't he, down the middle? He went from being this wide dribbly playmaker to this deadly box poacher. Maybe Gakpo's going to go through the same thing in the next year or so, but I don't know, to be making that transition in the Premier League, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, though what I will say is that I think when Arteta came in, and I think even now, okay, the 4-2-3-1 is working, but he's not necessarily totally wedded to it. We could imagine a situation, right, in which Arsenal were playing a 4-3-3 with Odegaard as one of the midfielders, and he has played deeper quite a bit this season. And then maybe you can understand why you're targeting wide forwards who can do a bit of everything. Because look at Liverpool, for example. Liverpool had Firmino, who was quite an unconventional striker. He was never really a centre-forward when he played in Germany. And he didn't play like a conventional centre-forward at Anfield either. And now, as they progress him out of the side, what did they go and buy? They didn't buy a centre-forward. They bought two wide guys in Jota and Luis Diaz. So you can understand that it seems like a lot of football at the top level is moving towards having guys who are comfortable playing wide or through the middle, who can create, who can dribble, but who are also goal scorers. So if that is the long-term aim here, then I can understand it a little bit more. And I do think, in the way that you were saying, it kind of needs Martinelli to play through the middle to make sense. I think it's one of those things that if Gakpo comes in and you want to try him at centre-forward and it doesn't quite work out, it doesn't necessarily mean that he can't contribute. Whereas obviously if you go and buy a conventional centre-forward and the centre-forward isn't scoring goals, then you're kind of in trouble. You've got to get rid of that player. If you've got somebody who can contribute in a wide zone, can contribute in 2 or 3 positions, then it's less of a worry if one of those positions doesn't suit them terribly well, because you still have a way to get them in the side and extract value. However, there's the enormous asterisk on this, which is marked Eredivisie. Like, it's just so difficult to tell how these guys are going to translate. You look at some of the last few big transfers out of the Eredivisie. Okay, like Breuer wasn't a sale, but he came from the Eredivisie to the Prem. His numbers are way down. He's been good, but his numbers are way down, especially shots. Bergwijn was a huge contributor in the Netherlands, not quite as big as Gakpo in the numbers, but a big contributor. Numbers are way down. Now we'll see if those rebound a little bit if he gets regular minutes under Conte, but still big decline. Ziyech is kind of the exception. Ziyech has adjusted his game and now looks like a very good Premier League forward, but he's quite a bit older. He had a lot of experience at the Champions League level, and he has had to adjust. He's not the all-round dervish that he was in the Eredivisie, where he would beat a bunch of guys. He was one of the best dribblers in the league, one of the best creators, one of the best shot takers. Now he's turned into much more of a facilitator. So the question is, what is Gakpo going to be? Maybe he arrives and he's a superstar. Maybe he arrives and he's a nobody. However, when we're talking about a sort of 40 million euro transfer here, it feels like 40 million euros on somebody who actually, when I watch him, he gives me a little bit of Ollie Watkins. I think physically he's quite similar to Ollie Watkins, and Ollie Watkins, of course, used to play out wide when he was at Exeter, then became a striker later on, and now is kind of halfway between the two. There's something there that I can see what people are looking at Gakpo and seeing as a potential centre-forward, but you don't want to place all your hopes on him next season. I mean, I say that, I would definitely give Lacazette at least another year deal. I think that's a sensible move. He's clearly still contributing at a good level, and I think he's a good head to have around in the squad. But yeah, it would basically need Gakpo to be a decent contributor from day one, and that is a gamble. It's a gamble.
Yeah, do you think he would contribute significantly more than basically, are you giving up on Nicola Pepe at this point?
I'm not necessarily giving up on him. I like Pepe, I think, quite a lot more than Arteta does. But I don't think Arteta really rates him, so I don't think we're really going to see him. I mean, maybe that's wrong. Arteta said he came back from the AFCON, a player reborn, but he said that 2 or 3 times. I still watch Pepe and I think, wow, this guy's talented. He's a great dribbler. He's been a great dribbler at Premier League level. He's creative. He can get shots. He's clearly a good finisher. And he has clearly worked on his movement off the ball, his defending off the ball. He's really good in the air, actually. One of the things I like when Pepe starts in Arsenal's attack is that there's at least one guy in the attack who can win a header because the rest can't. But is he giving us enough value to justify keeping him in the squad? I think if somebody comes in with a reasonable offer for him this summer, you have to consider letting him go. And if you said to me, right, okay, well, Pepe's going to go and you're going to get Gakpo in return, and then you're going to go and move for a centre forward, I'd say that probably sounds about right. Yeah. Because the bigger issue is Arteta's just never going to trust him. Unless Saka were to get injured and Pepe were to get a long run in the team and be very, very good, I think it's going to take a sort of act of God like that for Arteta to change his opinion about him. Yeah. So,
unfortunately, I don't know. Pepe, yeah, it's just what Saka brings off the ball as well in that 4-2-3-1, isn't it, on that right-hand side?
Well, you say that, but I think Pepe he's more of an off-the-ball player than Saka.
I'd say Saka's a lot more defensively stable, or a little bit more, I don't know, savvier in his defending. Pepe presses a lot, doesn't he? Maybe an underrated amount. It's
really hard to tell. It's really hard to tell because Pepe has been kind of, coming on for the last 10 minutes and he has clearly been told to chase people down. So I think
actually no, Pepe's in the bottom. Well, he's only 15 pressures per 90. So maybe I'm just chatting.
Yeah, but Saka's only around the same. Saka's only around 15 pressures per 90, and the top presser in Arsenal's squad is Odegaard with 18.8. We've been pressing more and more, but it's still difficult to see. Yeah,
whether that's a result of their function in the side or whether they're just
exactly. So I just don't know. So yeah, I'm not really sure about this one, but I can see the appeal, and I can see why people are going and watching YouTube compilations of Gakpo and thinking, quick, he's got all the things that you'd want to see. Like, why not? Why not give this guy a shot? And somebody's going to give him a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I bizarrely watched PSV versus Sturm Graz last year, and they're second in the Austrian Bundesliga at current, and he absolutely humiliated them. And that's when he really appeared on my radar in earnest. Obviously, we've had an eye on his numbers the last couple of seasons. So he has it in him to be a game-changing player at that level. So you can't discount that. Like, he could blossom into something really, really good. But what about if we're talking even more jeopardy than Pepe leaving Arsenal as a result of Gakpo coming in? What about Smith Rowe? What do you do with Smith Rowe if I don't know, Martinelli does play down the middle, Gakpo is great on the left, and Odegaard doesn't shift at 10?
I don't really worry about it because he could play on the left or as a 10. He's going to get minutes. Martinelli's injury record is obviously pretty poor, though his scoring record is pretty staggering. So
what I'm saying is, can you defend? I don't know. Can you get caught up on Smith Rowe having all this potential, having a really high ceiling, not quite being a first-team player at current, and can you simultaneously want Arsenal to sign Gakpo?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Arsenal, like I've said, Arsenal's attack is pretty thin, and it could get thinner by 2 or 3 players in the summer. Also, they're going to have a lot more minutes next year. This season has been a one competition season for Arsenal. True. Next year, they're going to either be in the Champions League or the Europa League. I think we can pretty safely say that. And so they are going to have a ton more minutes. So you can see how, maybe Saliba comes back from loan and gets minutes because Arsenal are going to have more minutes to give. Similarly, I think with Smith Rowe, he's gonna play a decent amount, even if it's just Martinelli getting injured. clearly Arteta loves him.
Yeah.
He can't play the same guys every single week, not when there are 2 games a week. But also, I think part of it is people getting a little bit ahead of themselves on Smith Rowe. Smith Rowe has scored a ton of goals this season, but he's way out over his skis. He's finishing at an insane rate.
Yeah.
And when you look at his underlying numbers, Martinelli's underlying numbers are superstar level. Saka's underlying numbers are getting there, and his consistency makes him a phenomenal prospect as well. Ødegaard looks like Arsenal's best player right now. Smith Rowe looks like a good prospect. That is what he looks like. He's not a guy who just has to start, you know. When you look at his numbers, he's not, and he's a guy who I love to see play for Arsenal. He's really pleasing to watch, and he's clearly got a high game intelligence, but if Arsenal want to progress, they can't afford to be
sentimental.
Well, they can't afford to be entirely guided by sentiment. They should say, you know what, Smith Rowe has done enough to deserve chances. But that's not the same thing.
Sentiment in football, I completely agree.
Yeah, and I think he will get that time.
I was basically just fascinated in where the compromise would fall. And you're the spokesperson for the whole Arsenal fan base on this. Lucky you, in really wanting to sign an exciting left winger simultaneously thinking that Smith Rowe should be in England's World Cup squad, for example. But yeah, I think it's we've exchanged blows with some Arsenal fans in the comments on this for the last couple of Sunday vibes, winners and losers. I really like him. I think he has a high ceiling and he's a really good prospect. But like you've just said, his output this season has been a little bit overrated, and to use that as sole justification for his inclusion in the England squad, or saying this is why he should get more starts for Arsenal, don't think really floats my boat.
Yeah, there are a lot of people ahead of him for England in my mind, but with Arsenal, if I were thinking about blocking somebody's development, I'd be thinking about blocking Martinelli's development. That's the guy who I'd worry about,
right? Because
I think Smith Rowe, we don't know where his ceiling is, but Martinelli could be a superstar. He could be a superstar, and Smith Rowe has not yet shown superstar potential. Maybe he has it in him, maybe he doesn't. But Arsenal, like I say,
let's hope he does.
Well, yeah, and that's a great problem to have.
Yeah,
exactly. If Arsenal sign Gakpo and they're like, oh God, how do we get all these stars into our team? Then I will certainly be happy. So should we wrap it up then, Chris? If you were Mikel Arteta, what would be your game plan going into the summer? Do you have a preferred candidate? Do you have a plan of attack for the future?
I would probably sign Jonathan David, like I said. And if Gakpo is available at the right price and Pepe leaves the club, that feels like a fair exchange to me. You touched upon it about 10-15 minutes ago. Like, his resale value, Pepe, is going to tumble. Like, he's on a decent amount of money as well. Getting, 20 mil for him feels fair, while you're only probably going to be paying Gakpo half or maybe 3/4 of the wages. Feels like sound financial planning, makes the squad an awful lot younger, increases the depth. I just don't go in for Nunez at 80 million euros. If I am a West Ham and I'm willing to overpay to the tune of 60, I think that's a good move for all parties. What did Diaz cost Liverpool? Going a little bit off-piste, but
about 45, I think.
Yeah. Then I'm not paying 80 for Nunez, even if there is a dearth of top number 9s out there at current. I pay 20 million more for Osimhen, like we've just spoken about, and take that hit. So yeah, I was thinking in my mind about Brozier there. I've watched him a couple of times and just think he would add a different dynamic to your forward line. And it's a little bit Nunez-like in my mind. That could be different come next year, but still.
I still look at Brozier and I think this is quite Martinelli-like. He's fast, he gets shots. He doesn't have the creativity of Martinelli, and he doesn't necessarily have the intensity. I really like the player, but I would like to see him at a West Ham type side, or even as a Vardy replacement at Leicester if they fancy Daka off the left. That would be interesting to me, but he's much more in that vein. He's a low touch player, and right now he does just sprint and shoot, and that's great. That's enough to be a really good striker. But is it good enough to be a striker in this system? And is the system going to be geared to you doing that rather than geared to Martinelli doing that? I don't know. But yeah, Armando Broja, very bright future, I think, at the top level. So let's bring it to a close then, Chris. Thank you very much for joining me today. Is there anything that you'd like to point the viewers/listeners to before we say goodbye?
Go and watch the latest Team Talk on the England squad selection. Pat was ecstatic to be involved in that conversation.
Love it.
But it was
Love the three lines.
Another great addition to the canon that is Team Talk. Yeah.
I mean, Team Talk at this point is organised mayhem. It's it's almost bullying, but it's good fun. So definitely check out Team Talk, where I got to talk about my favourite football team in the whole world, the team I've supported since childhood, England, the Three Lions. The ones who are always coming home with football. But yeah, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast as well, whether at Football Daily Podcast on YouTube or whether using your favourite podcast app. We really appreciate your continued support. Thank you very much for watching/listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.